Chapter 2. Discarnates and Demons. Becoming Possessed. When 22-year-old Joni first came to see me, some of her close friends had moved away, her mother had recently died, and then her elderly neighbor, Betty, died too. Joni and her husband weren't close to Betty, but they had been helping her out during her final illness. Almost immediately after Betty passed away at home in her apartment, Joni began hearing a masculine-sounding voice in her head. The voice told her she hated Jesus and she hated God. It told her she hated her husband, her dog, her life. It claimed she hated everything except Satan. The voice also told Joni she was scared, which was certainly true, especially since it insisted it would never leave her. Hearing voices is one of the more revealing signs and symptoms of entity possession. Seeing disturbing or violent mental images, feeling suicidal, and undergoing sudden changes in your disposition or personality, especially following surgery or a traumatic event, are some indicators. But symptoms of possession are not always dramatic or sudden. Any of the following conditions or incidents may be connected with or the result of possession: depression, nightmares, night terrors, panic or anxiety attacks, chronic fatigue or exhaustion, poor memory or concentration, addictions and impulsive behavior, sexual acting out, migraines, multiple personality dissociative disorders, chronic relationship problems, spiritual stagnation. In the first of several healing sessions with Joni, I discovered that Betty had not crossed over after she had died. Her soul was still present on the earthly plane, and it was now in Joni. Betty was afraid too. While she was alive, she had been possessed by a demon who told her she would be punished for being a bad person. When she died, she looked for somewhere to go to avoid going to hell, and she found Joni, whose auric shield had already been weakened by her mother's death and the loss of her close friends. But in spite of what an entity's voice may tell you, being possessed does not mean you are a bad or evil person. There are many different ways you can encounter an entity. You can simply be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You can become temporarily vulnerable, as Joni had, or you can inadvertently do something that opens the door, so to speak, and lets the entity in. Engaging in certain activities or being in certain places can put you at a greater risk for coming in contact with entities. Some things to be careful of include using oracle tools without knowing what you're doing or without being protected. For example, Ouija boards, tarot cards, automatic writing. Channeling without the proper training or protection. Holding on to strong negative emotions such as grief, fear, anger, anxiety, or pain. Having surgery or dental work. Spending time in hospitals or cemeteries. Dabbling with black magic or being around someone else who is using black magic. Drinking alcohol or using drugs excessively. This doesn't mean that every time you have surgery, feel anxious, visit a cemetery, or go to a bar, you will automatically become possessed by an entity. It means these situations make you more susceptible, especially if you are in a weakened state with a lower vibration or are not adequately protected, which was the case with Joni. My work has been a constant learning experience for me, and I expect it will continue to be. When I first began encountering these entities, my impression was that they were easy to acquire. But I have since learned that if you stay positive and strong, you may be attacked, but your risk of possession will be much less than it would be if your vibration is at a low level. You can also attract an entity by unwittingly allowing it in, which often happens when someone is unwilling to let go of a close loved one who has died. When Betty entered Joni, she wasn't intending to harm her. She was seeking her help. Joni actually heard her ask for it. But whether or not discarnates intend harm to their host, possession by a discarnate always results in harm to both the entity and the host. The natural progression when we die is for our soul to go to the light. Discarnates do not belong on this plane, and there is nothing positive they can gain or contribute by remaining earthbound. With the aid of my guides, I assisted Betty in leaving Joni and going to the light. During that healing session, Betty apologized to Joni for the pain she'd caused her. She hadn't known where else to go, and she believed Joni was someone who would be able to find a way to help her. It turned out she was right. Discarnates. Discarnate beings like Betty are the entities I had been reading about in Edith Fiore's book, The Unquiet Dead, in the incident related in the introduction. Discarnates are individuals who were formerly alive, but when they die, instead of going directly to the light, these displaced souls remain on the earthly plane, which is why they are also called earthbound spirits. There are lots of different reasons why discarnates remain here. They may be confused and not realize they have died, especially if their death was sudden. They may be afraid of what comes next, especially if they fear going to hell, as Betty did. Some are motivated to remain here by their attachments, either positive or negative, to people or places. Very often to people who are grieving and don't want to lose contact with their lost loved ones. Once discarnates get into people, they get stuck and can't get out. Usually, all I have to do is show them the light. I create a vortex of light with my guides, and you'll find on my website soundtracks and YouTubes that will show you and lead you through this process. And I simply say, after I've created that vortex of light to the heavens, look up. Just look up. When they see the light, they know what to do, and they go. Sometimes their deceased loved ones appear to them to encourage them to leave. There are psychics who can actually see discarnates, but I generally feel them rather than see them. Most of the time, as soon as a discarnate leaves and goes to the light, I experience an immediate backflash of love from it. It's a love you don't normally experience on this planet, a supernatural love. There's so much appreciation and gratitude that I almost always shed a few tears. It's that powerful and intense. Not all discarnates attach themselves to living people. Some are ghosts who roam around a house or some other building or area without entering and possessing a person. Sometimes these discarnates stay in one location, but other times they may go from place to place with the people they're connected to. Some people I've talked to have had discarnates following them around for 20 years or more. The people know the discarnates are there, but assume they just have to keep living with them. When a discarnate attaches itself to a living person's energy field, or aura, or to the person's physical, emotional, or subtle body, it has to be released, where it could remain with the host until the person dies. The longer an entity has been in residence, the more likely the host is to believe the entity's agenda is his or her own agenda. That's why the period of time immediately after an entity removal can be very confusing. Divine healings, which transcend time and space, work on 4 levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. You receive healing not only for what you carry from this incarnation, but also from what you carry from other lifetimes as well. It may take a while to process everything, and sometimes we can't safely release all of it at once, which is why divine healings are most effective over the course of 3 sessions during a 6-week period. Although it is possible to have only a single entity, once one is gotten in, it is much easier for other entities to get in too. More often than not, there are multiple entities possessing a single host, each with its own personality and its own agenda. One says, do this. Another says, do that. A third wants to send you in yet a different direction. I've seen people who have had entities for most of their lives, some since they were young children. They have no idea what it's like to not have to listen to a myriad of demanding voices telling them what's wrong with them and what they should do. Joni was fortunate in a way. because she had been free of entities until her neighbor died. So she knew right away that something was very wrong. Demons. After Betty left Joni and went to the light, it became clear that Betty's demon had also found a host in Joni and had likely caused Betty's spirit to enter her. That demon was the source of the voice Joni was hearing, and it did more than talk to her. Sometimes it growled, and when it growled, even her husband heard it. During one of our healing sessions, I called in the protection of my 100,000 angels and invited my guides in. They removed the demon from Joni, but she continued to hear the voice, or at least a voice. We discovered there were other demons present in her apartment, as well as inside that entire apartment building. Like discarnates, demons don't always attach themselves to a host, but sometimes roam around inside or outside buildings. Joni said that a friend who lived in the same complex had also been hearing voices, as had some of the other residents. After that session with Joni and her husband, I drove to their apartment. When I arrived, she told me the voice had said it hated me. Of course it hated me. Entities feed on your power and energy, and they don't want to be evicted. They'll do and say almost anything to keep from leaving. They know when you've made the choice to be healed, and they will do whatever they can to prevent you from following through. The first thing they'll do is ridicule the idea that entities even exist, and therefore the idea that anyone could actually release them. Oh, that's nonsense, they'll say. That's ridiculous. It's a bunch of hooey. Next, they may threaten you or put obstacles in your way to keep you from seeking help, such as physical pain or illness, an empty gas tank, road construction, anything to slow you down or prevent you from taking steps to get rid of them. If you persist and make an appointment to see me, they will often then engage and try to attack me. That's why I begin the healing process even before your appointment, in order to neutralize the entities and even release some of them if necessary, and to call on the angels and my guides to protect both of us. Discarnates and demons don't serve any positive purpose whatsoever. They don't ask your permission or wait for you to invite them in. They're present whether or not you want them there, because free will doesn't mean anything to them, and they won't leave at your polite request. Joni's demons harassed her, intimidated her, and lied to her. They did their best to wear her down on every level, sometimes talking to her non-stop for days at a time. What's the nature of this demonic or dark force energy? Where does it come from? There's no way to prove this, and maybe it's because of my Christian background that I see it this way, but I think demons are the fallen angels, the ones who sided with Satan when he rebelled against God. They are still rebelling, still trying to poison the well, causing suffering wherever they go. Demons are much more powerful than discarnates, and there are a lot of them. I estimate there are multiple demons for each person on this planet. Unlike discarnates, demons were not formerly human, so they don't usually have a prior connection with their hosts. Most of them are just looking for an accessible person to use. They are 100% evil and destructive, and they're trying to take down as many of us as they can. Demons are a form of energy. You can't destroy energy. All you can do is transform it. Where demons come from is less interesting to me than what happens to them when they're sent to the light. I believe they really are transformed, rehabilitated, if you will. Although they are a form of energy, they are souls too. I think they see the light as being their demise, their end. And it's true that once they go to the light, they can't come back to earth. But it's far for the end of them. After my guides did a house cleaning at Joni's apartment complex, she came back to see me, still hearing a voice. She was convinced her demon had returned. But if it had gone to the light, how could it have returned? I had never encountered anything like that. During the second session, the voice Joni heard proclaimed himself to be her eternal lover. He was exceedingly jealous of her husband and told Joni she belonged to him. She was his. Furthermore, he claimed Joni wanted him with her, and in fact kept calling him back to her. Not consciously, of course, but maybe unconsciously. Another healer present at this session is psychic. She said that when my guides had sent that demon to the light, he told Joni, "I'll get you. I'm coming back." During another session, we learned that in a past life, Joni had been involved with a magician, a sorcerer who was in league with some very dark forces. He and Joni had indeed been lovers. He'd practiced black magic during the time of King Arthur, and Joni had been one of his students. In another lifetime together, when they were both killed during the Crusades, he'd made a pact with the dark forces to continue to be with Joni. They gave him the power to rematerialize over and over again. And in each new life, when Joni called him back, he always returned to her. His intention was to create so much confusion in her mind that she would no longer be able to function in this dimension. At this point, I wasn't aware of demon-controlled discarnates, so the story we were getting was a little garbled, as it is sometimes the case. We were being misled to believe there was only one demon, and that he had the power to return after being taken to the light. But that was not true. Cords. Although we didn't yet know how many demons and discarnates we were dealing with, we knew there were some powerful energetic connections, or cords, between Joni and these entities that still hadn't been severed. Cords are like etheric umbilical cords. They can attach to you at any place on your body, generally at the location of one of the chakras, typically in your chest area where the heart chakra is located. Cords can connect you to a person, a place, or a thing, either in this life or in a past life, and even a future life. Cords are not always negative or harmful. We often have energetic cords between ourselves and our loved ones, for example. Sometimes those cords are positive and sometimes they're not. If they're harmful, they need to be cut because they can affect you in a lot of different ways. When I'm working with someone who has cords, I don't necessarily know where they all go, what's on the other end, and I don't need to know that. What's important is cutting them if they're harmful and being done with them so you don't have to deal with those issues anymore. Cords are like weeds. If you chop a weed off at the topsoil level but don't get rid of the roots, it can quickly grow back. In order to get rid of cords completely, we have to not only cut them, we also have to pull their roots out of the person's body. Many people I've worked with have actually felt the etheric roots of their cords being pulled out of them. I asked Archangel Michael to cut every cord that was connecting Joni to any and all dark entities. Those cords were conduits that had been allowing the dark energy to return to her again and again over hundreds and hundreds of years. After we began cutting them, Joni started hearing numbers. Archangel Michael was telling her how many past life cords she had. The final number was 182. And he cut every one of them. When he finished cutting them, he sent them to the light so their energy would not be left to float around on this planet. And Joni finally stopped hearing the demonic voice. After so many lifetimes, the connection had finally been severed. What the guides tell us is that whether something has happened in the past, will happen in the future, or is happening right now, it's actually all happening right now. That's a hard concept for me to get my mind around. But if it's true, it would explain why all of Joni's past lives were affecting her in the present. Attachments. Joni told me that when she first came to see me, she was distraught and depressed. I remember our first few sessions when she couldn't even sit still in her chair. A month later, she was much calmer and more in control of herself. She was no longer hearing the voice all the time, and she no longer had any demons inside her. At that point, with the presence of so many guides around her, it would have been very, very difficult for anything else to get into Joni. But although she did not have any entities in her, she was still being attacked by demonic attachments, which in her case were related to more past life issues. Unlike entities, attachments do not get into you to possess you. They get through your auric shield when you're weak and latch onto you on the outside. Like leeches or ticks, they can suck the life force right out of you. They can actually make you feel sick, the same as demons can. Just one attachment can make you feel critical, irritable, and grumpy, and make you feel tired and lethargic. That's just one. I've seen people with hundreds, some with even over 1,000 attachments. And they can cluster up on top of each other. And you can keep attachments, if you don't have them released, you can have them for years. And they create chronic medical problems if you've had them for a long period of time. So it's important to get rid of attachments. Attachments are similar to demons, not as powerful and much easier to remove, and they don't put up a fight, but they're just as prevalent as demons. The bigger danger with attachments is that they tend to weaken you further. They can fracture your auric shield and make you vulnerable to stronger, more invasive entities. The only agenda attachments have is survival. Basically, they're parasites. They work on you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. If you don't get rid of attachments, they can create all kinds of problems. They are nearly as destructive as demons, but still should be treated with caution. There are a lot of different theories about where attachments come from and what they are, and the psychics and healers who can actually see them can sometimes detect where they came from. Some people may be interested in obtaining that kind of information, but again, it's not my bailiwick. I don't focus on where they come from because I think it's more important to remove them, send them to the light so they can stop harming people. Treating the symptoms. It was no surprise Joni's doctors believed she was schizophrenic. One of them prescribed an antipsychotic and another put her on anti-anxiety medication. So many people visit medical practitioners and psychiatrists for their physical, mental, and emotional problems, but regardless of the diagnosis and treatment, they don't experience any relief or healing because the underlying source of the problem is still there. These people continue to live unhappy, sometimes tormented lives for years. You have to wonder what percentage of people in jail and mental hospitals are there because they're possessed. What would our world look like if they were effectively healed? Obviously, not all blocks, problems, and illnesses are the result of possession, but many of them definitely are. And when the source of the problem is entity possession, most doctors or therapists are powerless and clueless to provide a cure. Often by the time people come to see me, they have already been through the gamut of medical doctors, drugs, hospitalizations, psychiatric treatments, etc. Coming to me may be their last resort. But after the entities have been removed, they are then able to respond to whatever medical and or psychological treatment they need because they are no longer dealing with someone else's agenda. They're able to do their own work and learn how to take care of themselves. While entity removal is often the key element in someone's path back to wellness, it isn't a panacea or a quick fix. Results are not 100%. And not everyone is 100% better instantly. Sometimes that is the case. Many people can feel the entities leaving them, and they feel lighter instantly. That's the most common report I get at the time they're removed. But healing is a gradual process. No matter how much better you feel in the short term, after a healing, you have to make long-term lifestyle changes and changes in your thinking. Otherwise, you're going to be susceptible to possession again. Although the entities that were removed can't return, more are always lurking around waiting for an opportunity. It's just like being healed from a physical illness or disease. If you resume the bad habits that led to the illness, you're likely to get sick again. So what you do after a divine healing to change your negative thinking and raise your vibration to protect yourself is as important as what I can do for you. Over the course of several divine healing sessions, Joni became stronger and calmer. She started to get in touch with her own guides, especially Archangel Gabriel, who often comes through to me and who came through every time I worked with Joni. She learned to call on Gabriel, to request his protection, and was able to recognize his presence. He had been with her all along, but she hadn't been aware of him, just as Raphael had been with me all those years without my knowing it. From then on, she was able to call on Gabriel and her other guides whenever she felt the need for extra protection. After what she had been through, it wasn't surprising that the biggest obstacle Joni had to overcome was her own fear. That's true for so many people. Although she continued to struggle with her fear, she got better and better at dealing with it. She learned how to counter negative thoughts with positive ones. She developed a more positive attitude and raised her overall vibrational level. By calling on and using her guides regularly, she kept herself protected. When I saw Joni 6 weeks after our first session, she was not the same person who had first come to see me. She was transforming her fear through love. Experiencing a divine healing. The divine healing process utilizes the energy of Jesus Christ and the angelic and archangelic realms. It works on 4 levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Only love and light are transferred to you during a divine healing. Most of the work takes place on another plane or dimension, so it is not painful. While some people report feeling physical sensations such as pressure, heat, lightness, or a jerking movement, you may not even be aware of what is being done on your behalf. Each person's situation is somewhat unique in terms of the long-term healing process, but a couple of the things are true for everyone. After a divine healing session, you will definitely need to take extra good care of yourself, as your body cleanses the remaining toxicity and energetic debris at the pace that is best for you. As simple as this sounds, drinking lots of pure water is essential. You will have received energetic assistance to help you move your life forward, but this is not a passive process. You will need to pay close attention to your thoughts and your behavior. When you notice you are thinking or acting negatively, you can intervene and turn your thoughts and behavior in a positive direction. It's hard enough to deflect all the negativity we're bombarded with on a daily basis from TV, radio, the internet, and the newspapers. It's next to impossible to turn your thoughts in a positive direction if you've got one or more entities inside you. They just keep you down no matter what you do. But once you are free of them and their influence on you, it's much easier to raise your vibrational frequency and stay on the positive side. Many healers or spirit releasement practitioners believe you have to engage with an entity prior to releasing it. So they get into a dialogue with it to coax it into agreeing to leave. I don't do that. I don't engage them at all. In fact, they engage me. It isn't necessary to get them to agree to go. And in fact, demons aren't going to agree to go, and neither will the reptilians. So if something negative is there, my guides remove it right away. The same is true of karma. What you've done or not done in a past life may have set you up for possession in this lifetime, as was the case with Joni. But you don't need to know the details in order to be healed. Focusing on going back into your past lives to find an explanation isn't necessary. What we need to do is address what is happening right now, rather than why it's happening. If you want to delve into your past lives to explore them, there are other people you can turn to for help who are experts in that area. I don't need that information in order to do removals and healings. I know of several cases where people have tried various means to get rid of entities, such as prayer to God or the angels, priests, and exorcisms, but none of it had any effect. I'm not sure what forces were at work in those situations that prevented the entities from being removed then, or why my guides and I were subsequently able to help. There's a lot I don't yet know, but I trust that my guides will always let me know enough at any given time to do what needs to be done. More than 3/4 of the people I work on now aren't consciously aware of what I'm doing because the healing is being done remotely, usually at the request of a close friend or a loved one. In those cases, the person isn't able to give me permission to do the work, but the person's higher self gives permission. I can communicate with them soul to soul, and whenever I've done that, the soul has always given me permission. I also work remotely on residences, cleaning house, if you will. Once an entire family came to see me, leaving only their daughter's 19-year-old boyfriend at home. And during the session, I went into the house remotely to clean it. I didn't know he was in there, and he had no idea what I was doing. While I was working on the house, the young man suddenly saw a black shadow. Then the family cat began running up and down the stairs and all over the house. The young man fled in a hurry. He later said God had told him to get out of there, in spite of the fact that after cleaning the house, and it felt clear, good, and much lighter to everyone else, and even the cat had calmed down, it took a couple of months before he would venture back inside. Quite a few of the people who come to see me turn out to have psychic or healing abilities they had not been aware of. That was the case with Joni, who at the end of her 6 weeks was just beginning her journey of exploring and understanding the extent of her abilities in these areas. Entities are drawn to people who are doing this kind of work. Sometimes they're going for the strength, energy, and power of the person to try to take it over and use it for their own purposes. They also want to stop people from releasing entities. If they can lower someone's vibration and transform positive thoughts and energy to negative, they might be able to keep that person from doing the work. But when they target someone who isn't yet fully awake to his or her abilities, and the experience is what actually wakes that person up, possession kind of backfires on those entities. It's still a win-win situation in the end because the entities get to go to the light, which is the best possible place for them. The light is more powerful than the darkness. Light always transforms darkness. Although I say I do this healing for the sake of conversation or convention, I know it isn't me who's doing the actual healing. I serve as a channel or a vessel for spirit. I have the ability to call in the angels and the guides, and they're the ones who remove the entities. They're the ones who do the healing through me. When the angels and the guides are present, I feel their energy flowing through me, especially through my hands, and I know how to do whatever needs to be done. When other people with different abilities are present with me, we're all doing the healing together. It's a shared experience. Each person brings something unique, a different sensibility, a different approach. There have been times when I've been extremely grateful to have had other healers present. Times when it required the combined efforts of several of us to understand and deal with what we were all seeing and sensing. If these other people hadn't been there experiencing the same things I was experiencing, I might not have trusted my own senses.